Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I have with me my brother, J.P.
Hey
Say hello,
everyone.
J.P. Hey, well, we're glad that you're here joining us for our Thanksgiving edition of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. And today we're talking about both Thanksgiving and immigration, which, you know, is very tied in my mind, as well as I think what you were saying, JP. It's tied in your mind as well, because who celebrated the first Thanksgiving? They were immigrants, pilgrims. The pilgrims came coming to America, and going on to eventually 100 or so years down the road to establish the United States, the country we live in today. So first off, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Hope that you have a wonderful and safe week wherever you are, and that you're not affected by a lot of these crazy things that are happening at the border. Which I've been, as a reporter for the Catholic News Agency, I've been doing. It's kind of become part of my beat to do a lot of immigration reporting, because it does affect both the United States and the Catholic world a lot, and especially with it all being concentrated there in the southern border. A lot of the leaders who are responding to this, I think you could safely call it a crisis, are Catholics. A lot of Catholic bishops who are involved with it. A lot of Catholic charities is heavily involved. And then, of course, a lot of the people coming from Hispanic countries are Catholics. So there's a lot going on. Before I get too much in the weeds, though, what do you think, JP?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is what about this situation? And forgive me if I'm jumping too far ahead, but I think this is an important place to start. What about this situation marks it as a crisis?
Well, so this past year, um, the past recorded year, so for 2022, we don't have the 2023 numbers yet, but for 2022, there were 2.76 million undocumented immigrants that came into the United States, just from the southern border. And that was the new record that broke the previous record that had just been set the year before in 2021. Um, and so obviously there's huge numbers of people coming across, which, like I mentioned with the pilgrims, we're a nation built on immigrants. The only people who were here before the Europeans came were the Native Americans, and they had come thousands of years before that. So we're a country that's built on the people chasing their dreams and looking to build a better life. So what's problematic about that is that this, um, obviously there's many different opinions and voices on this, but what you get from such huge numbers of people coming across is that there has been rampant crime growing, in not only the border but in cities in which a lot of these migrants are kind of flowing into. I mean, just even the New York Democratic mayor declared that this is an emergency in New York. He said this is the issue that will destroy New York. And New York, obviously, being I don't know how many miles, hundreds and thousands of miles away from the border, and yet here it is, the pro-immigrant mayor saying that this issue is going to destroy our city. Um, the biggest issue that I've come across in when I've talked to a lot of people involved with the border is that are the biggest concern about the border is the surge in human trafficking, which that movie that was a smash hit that came out in the summer, Sound of Freedom, addressed the issue a bit on how people are taking advantage of this, of many people who are honestly wanting to seek a better life end up getting taken advantage of. You have cartels who are running, basically running parts of the border, and you get, both of us being from Houston. Houston has become a hub for human trafficking because it's the biggest city that's close, in close proximity to the border. And I think another aspect is that as a Texan, this is kind of a personal issue too, because Texas holds the Texas border with Mexico is over 50% of the U.S.-Mexico border. We have over 1,000 miles of border with Mexico, and so this is our issue. Um, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, another question. You're right. It's definitely a Texas front and center. We have the most border landmass of any other state, so we have to take leadership here. What are the numbers when it comes to human trafficking? Because that's a very that immediately makes my heart go like really, really pulls my heart at the heartstrings. So tell me, what are the numbers of this of the children especially being trafficked?
Well, I would direct you to the U.S. Border Patrol Chief, Chief Jason Owens, who is he gives regular updates. So I don't know if we have we can say just, this is the number of people that we know to be involved or to be victims of the human trafficking. It's not so clear cut, but he posts regular updates on just kind of every couple of days. Like, these are the numbers of people that we just caught this weekend involved in human trafficking. This is the amount of people, these are the amount of pounds of drugs that we've uncovered. So he would be a really good source, I think, to go for that, because I don't have exactly those clear cut numbers on me. But it's a rampant issue. And you ask any of the leaders, in the city of Houston, in the city, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, these being much more removed, and they're not like border towns, but they're the chief areas of commerce in Texas and in the area. And so that makes them the hubs and the place where you can go and have all those transactions that are happening. So it's a terrible thing.
And so they're Latin American children that are being smuggled in and then sold. Is that basically how it goes? They're sold to Americans?
Yeah, it's an international thing, so I don't think it's just Americans that they're being sold to, but it goes through America, and America is obviously the biggest consumer of a lot of the human trafficking and also a lot of the drugs. And so I would argue that definitely points to a crisis of morality here in the United States. That it is, nothing, all these issues are kind of all tied in together. Kind of that, makes me think, pointing back to the collapse of Christian values that the Christian values that this nation is built on. The fact that we are consuming a lot of that, which then powers these cartels to be able to take over big parts of Mexico and the border as well.
Okay, well, you've convinced me it's a crisis. So unpack more for me about what you're thinking. How can we do some good here with our few minutes together?
Well, I think it's important to kind of address this issue from both a Catholic, and you don't get this very often, the combination of the Catholic perspective and the conservative perspective on the immigration issue, because as we know, many things become very politicized. I think I had the opportunity to speak with a whole bunch of Texas bishops about this issue just last week, and one of them did make a really good point. Let me see if I can find what he said. But he was basically just talking about how we oftentimes as Americans, our first instinct is to think along the party line. What does the party say about this issue, instead of going to the faith and saying, oh, what is the Catholic faith? What does Catholic doctrine say about how I should approach this issue? And I think that's a really that's a really great point, because we should be looking first to the faith, first to what Christ has taught us as Catholics, like how we should respond. And I think the answer to that is that it's not super simple, because even with the bishops that I was speaking with, there was a wide degree of disagreement about what should be done and how we should approach. Some saying we need, because we need to care and love these people, we basically just need to have essentially open borders. I mean, he wouldn't say that, and he would probably wouldn't put it that far, but that's kind of the effect of what he was saying. And then you have others who are much more, we need a sound border, we need to close it down. But all because of that concern for the human person, both the people in border communities and in the United States, and also the people being brought across.
For these bishops that are pro, like letting everyone in, how do they get past this whole human trafficking thing? Because for me, it's like, okay, we shut it down because there's kids being trafficked.
Mhm.
Seems pretty simple to me, but I'm sure it's not that simple. How do these bishops get around that one?
Well, I mean, I think, like you said, it's a little bit more complicated than just like the simple. Um, these policies are leading to, this. What the most of the bishops that I've spoken with who are more are more for leniency towards migrants and more open borders are thinking more on the aspect of these people are coming, they're here, and if we turn them away, like it's inhumane to just turn them away, because they're here in our cities and they're at our gates right now. And it's inhumane to just turn them away when we know that they're fleeing, you know, oppression often cases, and just really terrible conditions and all, and even most of the other cases. So it's kind of just a difference of emphasis, um,
Right.
if that makes
It's
sense.
Yeah, it's an emphasis not so much on the problem of people coming over, but more on the emphasis on the problem of what to do now that they're here, and not really concerning here so much about how people got here. Is that kind of the emphasis?
Hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, also, so the word that consistently every single bishop that I spoke with used was, they all wanted comprehensive immigration reform. And so I asked the follow-up question after that, was like, what does that mean? What specifically are you advocating for in this case and in these cases? And again, that's where most of the disagreement, and they started to diverge more, because they're all coming from that basis of
Mhm.
wanting to care for the human person, and to treat them with human dignity, which
Mhm.
of course the Pope has. This has been one of his big issues since becoming Pope, that he's been pushing for, that we need to build um, bridges as opposed to walls between cultures, and it's really true.
But how
But you
much of
have
that
to
is
do it
just a political slogan, though?
right.
Like
You
Trump
have to
build
do
a
it
wall.
smart and
What's that?
realistic. Yeah, you have to do it smart and
Yeah.
realistically. I mean, if you're building a bridge for the cartel, that's not what you want to be doing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I will say that the Archbishop of Houston, he surprised me, because he was the heart. I think either him or the Bishop of Fort Worth were the hardest on the border, the ones that were advocating, we need to shut it down. We need to
Mm.
get to be an orderly process.
Mm.
Um, I mean, the Cardinal Donato of the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, like, he literally says, "This is not fair. He goes, this is not fair or right or just."
Mm.
Um, so that was again surprising, because the Bishop of El Paso is the current committee chairman for the U.S. bishops on migration, and
Mm.
so he is very much more an advocate for more lenient borders, and so he kind of creates the policy recommendations for the U.S. bishops. That being said, I was interested. It was interesting to see that there was a lot more disagreement between them internally than what they recommend officially.
And what does he recommend? What do they recommend officially?
Well, they've been very critical of, I don't know, for those who haven't followed, um, the Biden administration has started to, in recent months, be more Trumpy when it comes to immigration. So they started building more wall, uh, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, and they also imposed some more restrictions on migration than they had. That he reimposed certain restrictions that Trump had originally imposed. Both of those things, the Bishop of El Paso had been very critical of. Um, so basically, I'm trying to see my notes here. Yeah, Bishop Seitz of El Paso was saying um, that a lot of the budget that's spent on the border and border security would be better. I don't know if he would say would be better, but he says that some of that should also be going to um, addressing the issues in the home countries that a lot of these people are coming from. Um, which there could be some truth in that. I don't want to criticize any of these people. I'm just kind of saying what their views were. We can talk more about what our thoughts were in a second, but unless you want to
No,
interject
no, go
there.
for it. I was going to. I was definitely going to, but I don't want to interrupt the flow. Go ahead.
Um, yeah, I mean, but for Sites, he did address the drugs and those issues too. But that was also kind of a moral reminder of, like, actually, it is us that is funding this. We are funding the cartels by um, buying these drugs in such large numbers, and buying these, funding the human trafficking. Um, so that's again like another cultural thing that really has to be addressed, and a moral cultural issue that needs to be addressed. But of course, that's going to take time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that the irony of the facts that, America, the free market, the great bastion of the free market is subsidizing the unfree market, which is, the drug trade. And oftentimes people will will point to that fact as saying, well, we have to legalize drugs. And I think you're not quite, um, if you hold to that standpoint, maybe you're right. But if you're making that policy proposal because of the fact that this is a thriving market that needs to be brought into the fold of the rest of the free market, and then you're also your argument gets destroyed by the slave trade that's also thriving in this horror of horrors. Because what are you going to do? Bring back slavery? Is that also something you're going to do? Ultimately, I think most people who argue for the legalization of drugs would not also argue for the legalization of slavery again. So you need to make some. You're going to ultimately have to make some moral decision on this, and kicking the can down the road on morality never turns out well. So make a moral argument for legalizing drugs, and then maybe we can listen. But unless you make that moral argument, an argument of convenience isn't convincing.
Hmm.
So what else can we do here? How can we unpack more about this crisis?
Well, I think kind of returning to uh, the Thanksgiving theme that we have
Mm.
here. The Bishop of Laredo, which you and I both have a lot of family there. Um, Bishop Tamayo of Laredo, speaking on this issue, he's kind of gave a good reminder of, like, well, we do need to remember that um, the our ancestors, especially people from Laredo, um, not too long ago, these people were us, right? And that we um, our grandparents, great grandparents, these people built the society that we live in now. And I think that part about the society that we live in now is very important. And that's the big differentiator there, is that we live in the United States, which is a country that was built on Christian values. And that is something that cannot be forgotten. So we need to remember that these people coming across have the human dignity and deserve human respect. Um, but again, we're a country that's built on Christian values, and we have to uphold those values, I would say, at all costs. Um, and so, what I'm kind of getting at here is that immigration is is something that's occurred in all, throughout all of history. Um, it was immigration that destroyed the Roman Empire. The barbarians and eventually outnumbering the Romans. And I think that's something to remember, is that you can have millions of immigrants, and that can be a great thing for your economy, and it can be a great thing for your nation, but they have to have a basic fundamental agreement with the values on which your nation is built. Otherwise, it will have the opposite effect of what you would want. It will rip your country apart. And so I think, I was having a conversation earlier today about, I think it was, I'm not familiar with these writings, but the person I was speaking to was telling me that Aquinas actually wrote some about this, to St. Thomas Aquinas, the great theologian of the medieval ages. Um, he wrote on the need for a nation it can't accept huge numbers of migrants if they fundamentally disagree with the values of that nation. He said that is a moral imperative for a country to guard those values and to guard it from people who disagree with it. So I think that adds a bit more of a Catholic complexity to the simple, like, oh, these are people who need our help. They do need our help, but we also have a responsibility to our own people as well. So I would like to get your thoughts on that, because that was a different perspective, which I hadn't really heard much of before.
Oh, I mean, the events of the past week, I'm not the past, but the past month have utterly convinced me that we need to be more stringent on who we let in. I don't think it has to be very complex, though. I think simple things like, how do you feel about killing Jews, for example? Stuff like that. And if you seem to be pro that in any way, you're not going to get into this country. Like there needs to be some sort of focus on the fact that, like you said, we have Judeo-Christian values, and chief among them are right to life, even those people that you disagree with. So that should be something that's respected. You shouldn't be letting in uh, members of religion that might want to kill other members of religion that already live amongst you. That doesn't seem like a great idea. At the other hand, too, I don't understand I've yet to hear anyone make a legal argument for the fact that we should cap EB-5 visas, for example. An EB-5 visa are people that want to come in and invest and build jobs. They're high net worth individuals that wish to come and live in the United States and build companies with that money that they have. And we somehow cap the amount of people that get in on the EB-5 visa for some unknown reason. Now, it's not nearly as in high demand because there's not that many people that are around the world that qualify as that. But why is that? Why is that capped? Another reason I don't understand is, why do we cap H-1B visas? Or the H-1B visas are for people that are very well established as far as work goes. Then they come in with a lot of expertise in the particular fields. Now, obviously, you don't want to incentivize people undercutting labor for other Americans. So that doesn't make sense. But we already have rules in place for that, where you need to be paying these immigrants more or equal to what you would pay an American. Therefore, the American is generally the cheaper choice by very careful wage laws. So if that's the case, you've already addressed it. Why do you have to set these incredible limits to the H-1B visa if you've already not worried about giving away American jobs by it? It'd be unpaid. There are unfilled jobs that people are wanting to fill up on the H-1B visa. So there's arguments to be made on the side of legal immigration that really ought to be made. I think what I get the sense of right now, though, is that, like you said at the top, we're entrenching ourselves within different ideologies and are not really focusing on solutions at this point. Now, this whole crisis in the border is probably a crisis of compassion, it sounds like, where most of the laws seem to be getting made by the people that, like the Archbishop of El Paso, where you're focusing on trying to deal with, or not deal, but trying to help those that have already got in without thinking about stemming the tide of people that are coming in illegally and that are building to this problem, this growing problem that you're seeing. So it seems like it's a huge mess. And absolutely, as the fact that we are all immigrants of some sort must never be forgotten. We must never forget this time of Thanksgiving where we're all thankful to be alive and have a harvest in the United States. This is something that other people should be allowed that wish to live up to those same values to celebrate. But it seems like a huge mess and a little bit overwhelming at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it kind of makes me think when we're talking about Thanksgiving, especially the pilgrims, they lived off the land. They lived on the harvest and on hunting. And a hunter mentality is that we are. It's not what we want. We don't want to kill all the animals in the forest. That's not what a hunter is trying to do. Oftentimes you get that cartoon image of the evil hunter who's trying to, who just wants to kill all the animals, and that's not true. Their hunting is oftentimes for the preservation of those animals, of the creatures who live there. There's a certain amount of responsibility that goes into hunting, and I think that transfers over to this policy making perspective as well. You're wanting to preserve this country. You have a moral responsibility to preserve this country for the future generations, both your future generations and the future generations of migrants coming now and in the future. So it's not compassionate, I would argue, to allow unstemmed tides of people, and it's not compassionate to those people because it creates the human trafficking and cartel problem that we have today, and it's also not compassionate for the future generations who will have to deal with a country that is very much torn apart by these problems that we're having now. Of course, that's not to say that everybody, or even the majority of people who are wanting to come across the border, are bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think I would probably very much disagree with that. But it's about, I think, compassion and also responsibility is kind of how I would frame this whole issue. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a responsibility to the citizens of our nation, of this nation. And then we are called to be compassionate to citizens of other nations, to people everywhere. But our responsibility lies with Americans, people of this country. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's not a matter of race or any other thing. Obviously, the vast majority of people who live on the Texas border, at least, are Hispanic, and a lot of those people are against no restrictions on immigration, and they themselves all came not that long ago as immigrants, but they also have that reality of like we need to preserve the communities that we have built here, and we want to continue welcoming people, but not at the expense of the home that we have built here. Um, yeah, so I think which bishop was it that kind of um, yeah, no, but again, great conversations with them, and I don't want to. If any of this ever gets to them, I hope that they're not thinking I'm criticizing them, because it was really interesting to hear. Um, but again, I think it takes a lot of prayer and also a lot of trust in God, because ultimately, um, these issues we try to do our best to solve them, but it takes trust in God and action. So yeah.
Absolutely. Is there any final solution? If we're going to try and be solution oriented here, what's our path, do you think, practically
Um,
speaking?
yeah, this, yeah, it's kind of been reduced to campaign slogans a lot, like build the wall, or, you know, walls are racist. Everyone's kind of just shouting at each other. And that,
I think it's
unfortunately,
build the wall or build the bridge. I think those are kind of the two
yeah.
campaign slogans
Um, I
from
think,
two politicians that have a lot in common, I would say too.
hmm, what do you mean?
But two politicians being Trump and Pope Francis that have a lot in
Um,
common.
yeah, well, unfortunately, I think that what's realistic right now, what's actually on the table, is nothing that will actually solve the problem. The only thing that really will solve the problem, and this is what many of people have told me, both bishops and people involved with border issues and policy, is that we need to just actually rehaul the entire immigration system that we have in the United States. It needs to actually be fixed, kind of like you were saying. Like, why do we have all these random limits on people who are coming, who actually have jobs and have a way of working and earning a living here? Um, right now, the system that we have kind of in incentivizes the cartels and crime lords to be able to take advantage of it, because it's not a system that's actually conducive to people coming here legally, and so you get everyone coming illegally. Um, so unfortunately, that's nothing really. Kind of until we can pressure our people in power to actually take a more realistic and less campaign slogany kind of mentality about this. And I think we should continue to advocate. That's one thing I would say. Continue to put pressure on your representatives to actually do something, and that might take compromise. You might not be able to get everything that you want, but you need to actually push for something that can be achieved, instead of just promising the moon and then getting nothing. um
Yeah, I have a slogan that I actually think that we should have a slogan for a solution here. Slogans are useful because they're easy to remember and then they can operate as a North Star. But my slogan wouldn't be from a politician, it would be from St. John Bosco, who had the great idea for when he was raising his all his gangster children, all his children who had no one to raise them, and he took them in. He had a very simple slogan, which he went by: make it easy to be good and hard to be bad. And right now, we're doing the opposite when it comes to immigration policy. We should make it easy to come in legally and thereby get those people that want to be law abiding to come in more easily. And then we should make it very difficult to come in illegally. And by saying being very strict in punishing those that wish to break laws and come in illegally. It might seem harsh at the time, but it's actually the most merciful thing to do if you want to make it easy to be good and hard to be bad, which ultimately worked very well for St. John Bosco, and I think it will work well for the situation as well.
Hmm. Yeah. I would agree. I agree. I agree with that. It's again, but that just takes actually speaking with um the people that represent you and the people who are in power. Um, and oftentimes we forget that we can actually do that. But our most of our representatives have many different ways of reaching out to them and advocate on your own behalf here to say, hey, this is a problem for me, and I want you to get something done about it. Aside from that, though, I think that as Catholics, we do still have a calling to respond with charity. And I think that the church has done a really great job in this respect of actually establishing charities and aid groups that do a lot to help. And I would never discourage anyone from actually, going out there and making giving of themselves to be helpful, because especially during now that Christmas is coming and as winter months are coming, it gets really cold and it can get dangerous. So obviously you don't want to put yourself in danger, but there are ways to help. So I would kind of take that double-edged sword approach of advocating to make realistic changes and also kind of helping in the ways that you can.
It makes sense. Makes complete sense. And I'm also, when you say that, I think back, putting myself into this shoes of our pilgrim forefathers that came to this country, or put ourselves into the shoes of the Spanish conquistadors that came and found the the Native Americans here that allied with them, and together they took down the oppressive Aztec Empire. It seems like the winning combination for people that are part of an existing nation or existing tribe is to find what is helpful and incorporate it. And then at the same time, battle against that which wishes to destroy you. So if we use that, I think that we can make some progress. And I love that you said call your congressman. That's great. I haven't called our new congressman yet. We had Congressman Crenshaw, and we got redistrict. So now we gotta call our new one, which is
Mhm.
good. I need to drop a line to him about something at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool that the system that we have is actually very conducive to actually being able to get in touch with them and talk with them, because oftentimes they do want to talk to you. I'm sure there are some out there that are just in there to get Instagram followers, but
There's some congressmen that are internet trolls. I
yeah,
tagged I tagged you in internet troll congressman post from Houston today. I was like, wow, this is
yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty silly sometimes. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
seen some that I'm like, what?
yeah.
You're in Congress?
You, you're not even an adult by the way you speak, and yet here we are. Anyway, close this out, Pete.
Yeah, so quick little take because it's Thanksgiving week, and I cracked out the Christmas mug over here. Um, we like to do a quick little take on something that's part of the art world and culturally relevant. This came out many, many years ago, so it's not new, but it is culturally relevant at the moment because as Thanksgiving rolls around, everyone starts thinking about Christmas too. So the movie I'm thinking about right now, I have a little movie recommendation for everyone. If you haven't seen it yet, is Holiday Inn, an old classic film with Bing Crosby and who else is that? Fred Astaire and a few others. And it's one of those movies that I loved watching. It was probably one of my, if not my favorite, definitely one of my favorite Christmas movies. Used to love watching with the family. Um, so if you're looking for a good, solid Christmas movie, to watch this week or in the coming weeks, definitely recommend Holiday Inn.
Yeah. And it has that classic focus on family, a focus on a kind of a federalistic idea, a federalism idea of focus on your own backyard. Don't go off and be some sort of weird cloud chaser, but build something that allows you to to make what's important in your own life, family, and things like that. So it's a great movie with a great message that really resonates today. And I would say if you're going to get it, buy a digital, not buy a physical copy, not a digital, because I think it's a matter of time before people come to take it away from you digitally, just because of how that blackface scene. So there's a scene where Bing Crosby was trying to not let Fred Astaire find they're both. It's a love triangle going on, and Bing Crosby's convinced if Fred Astaire finds his love interest that she'll be swept off her feet, and so he comes up with a plan to have them sing a song in blackface instead of what they were going to sing, which was normal. And so I'm sure that scene is going to be there. It's gonna if it hasn't already been censored and banned, it's going to be. So buy the physical copy if you want to watch it.
Yeah, just get physical copies of everything.
Yeah.
AI is going to take over soon. So it's just get physical copies of everything and then live in the forest. You'll be fine. Don't worry.
I think AI is great. We should talk about that
Yeah,
another time.
another time. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us this week. I'm glad that you were here. A little bit of a shorter episode, but that's a good thing sometimes.
Happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. Yeah. And we'll catch you next week with the Pinedo Brothers and see you next time.